Mike Mulhern from MikeMulhern'sNASCAR. Sunday morning, on the job, going to Auto Club Speedway to check out a couple of stories. Got some suspects. First, those trick shocks that David Reutimann had. What was that all about? NASCAR busted him. It's an old trick. Teams pump up the shocks to maybe 800 pounds instead of the 70 pounds. Raises the rear of the car. More downforce, goes into the corner better. Sticks better. Been around for a while. I don't know if NASCAR's have been inspecting those things lately or not. You can't inspect every part of every car before every run. Sometimes they let things slide. Crew chiefs keep an eye on that. They let something slide too long. Hey, let's pull that trick back out of the bag. Try that one more time. Maybe that's what they did. Maybe they got some new shocks. Remember a couple years ago at Dover, after NASCAR came on to the trick and figured out what was going on, they had a time limit. After your run, qualifying, practice, whatever, your car had 5 minutes to settle back down. They pump up the shocks. The rear car gets more downforce. You go faster in the corners, and then when you stop, the shocks slowly bleed back to normal. Okay, it was about a 5-minute time frame, I think. Jimmy Johnson didn't make the 5-minute time frame, or maybe it was Brian Vickers, I can't remember. One of those Hendrick cars got caught like that, and I think NASCAR sort of let it go. Maybe that's what they're doing again. I'm not quite sure. We're going to check out that. Shocks. Rear shocks. Is that a trick people have been pulling? And NASCAR just got onto it? We'll check that one out too. The big story? Ford. Greg Biffle. The whole Ford operation seems to be under a lot of pressure. This is California. California, first time in the chase. And usually the races out here are pretty much snoozers, gas mileage finishes, not a lot of passing. Hey, not a lot of guys even getting close to rubbing fenders. But it's a chase race now, and that apparently is putting a little pressure on these guys. They're running 207, 208, 209 into the first turn. You got a little antsy, got a little pressure, sponsorship pressure, car owner pressure, like Greg Biffle, crew chief pressure after that 4-tire call overrule last week that cost him the race at Kansas. Well, Greg looks like he's a little under the gun right now. And then Saturday, Greg got into it with Joey Logano in the nationwide race. Apparently put him in the wall. Apparently telegraphed that move ahead of time. NASCAR was going to check the tapes. And then Greg got involved with another crash later on. Well, I don't know if there's something going on between the Toyota guys and the Ford guys, or Greg Biffle was just feeling the heat. But it looks to me like there's a little bit of pressure over there. We talked to Jack about those 17-inch tires that he's the point man on. He blew up. Too expensive. Don't need them. Unnecessary. Very short conversation. I could tell it wasn't a good day for Jack Roush, even though he did sign a new sponsor, Copart. Cash for clunkers? Hey, these are the guys that turn those clunkers into cash. Some of that cash is going to Jack Roush and Carl Edwards in the Nationwide Series next year. But the big story in the Roush camp, I think, this pending merger between Doug Yates, the Roush affiliate, the guy that does all the engines, and George Gillett. Now, what I've seen of George Gillett, I haven't seen much of him in 2 years he's been around, is that he's pretty volatile. He's not mellow like Rick Hendrick is. He doesn't go with the flow. We saw that vividly at Richmond, remember? Mark McCardle, team competition director, blew up when he was told that apparently most of those 60 guys in the engine room were going to get fired at the end of the season with this merger, and they fired him. Hey, that's not the Rick Hendrick way. That's not the Jack Roush way. If that's the George Gillett way, and we've seen that before too, remember? I think it was last year. George was going to dump Dodge and try to buy the Bill Davis operation to get the Toyota deal. The last couple of years on their contract, whatever it was for engines, made a big deal about it. Wasn't very shy about it at all. I remember talking to BD about that at Martinsville. Yep, looks like it might happen. And then the next thing you know is Toyota saying, whoa, wait a minute, let's think about this thing. They thought about it and thought about it and thought about it and nixed it. Nixed it rather late, actually. Remember Michigan a couple weeks ago? We were talking with Casey Kane, the #1 driver for Richard Petty Motorsports, and George Gillett. He'd just done a Budweiser shoot for 2010. In the car, not a Dodge, not a Ford, a Toyota. We asked him, what's this on a Toyota? That was about the 15th of August. And then the next thing we know is 3 weeks later, they're announcing a deal with Ford. Last weekend in Kansas, George said, we got an agreement and understanding. We're going to turn that into legal documents. We got it all handled. It's going to be a Ford deal. Well, now I'm hearing that John Menard, who's rather wealthy, the guy who's in charge of Menards, the competition to Lowe's and Home Depot in the home improvements market, he has another year remaining on his contract with Roush and Yates, but it's contingent upon there being no change in ownership. A merger with Gillett would free Menard and his son John and his son Paul to move somewhere else, maybe to Richard Childress's. Who knows? I mean, John Menard is like $59-60 billion. He's one of the wealthiest men in America. Good man to have on your side when you're playing this game. And apparently he doesn't get along that well with George Gillett. Apparently George Gillett doesn't get along very well with his business partner Tom Hicks over there in Liverpool, whatever that's all about, the soccer operation. Even the Crown Prince, or the Prince of Saudi Arabia that they were talking with, made light of that, or made note of that when they were talking internationally about him investing in that soccer team. That's a lot of people that George Gillett suddenly doesn't get along with, that we know about. I'm thinking that Jeff Smith, who runs Roush Fenway Racing, and Jack Roush might be looking over this whole thing and saying, gee, I don't know if we really want to do a deal with this guy. We'll have to check that one out too. That's what we're working on today, Sunday morning. Oh, and by the way, my pick of Greg Biffle to win the California 500, not quite sure about that right now. I think he's under a little pressure. I like guys that are cool and confident. Hey, can you say Jimmy Johnson? It's October. Mike Mulhern from MikeMulhern'sNASCAR. We'll be back later on today with what happened at California's Auto Club Speedway.